Welcome back to part 2 of our Mastering Our Emotions, the third series in the self-mastering series that we started at the beginning of 2022. My name is Jona Bryndis, and we will continue right where we left off with our part 1 here, a brief overview of what we've covered in part 1. So if you haven't watched part 1 yet, go back if you would like to know more about the differentiation between emotions, feelings, and emotionality, which seemed quite surprising to some of us. Also, the order of processing, which is something that I would like to do with you live here as an exercise one more time. Yeah, what comes first in us? Yeah, do we have physical sensations first? Do we have emotions first? And then thoughts? Or do we have thoughts first and that triggers an emotion and that emotion triggers a physical reaction? There is no right or wrong. We all are a little different, and obviously it also depends on the context in which this occurs. We learned about trauma and how trauma overrides our normal order of signal processing and what this means for us. Yeah, so in general, self-mastery is all about differentiation and educating ourselves. So just as a reminder, these workshops / lectures are not here to heal you. They're here to educate you. Yeah, this is augmented education to the Sacred Self-Healing Program. And the actual work then needs to happen for yourself. Now, we will have a practice workshop with this Mastering Your Emotions, just like we did with Mastering Your Thoughts. This workshop is in 2 weeks, I think. Check the calendar on my website. And if you were invited to this workshop, then you will also get the invitation for the Dealing with Big Emotions practice workshop on the 24th of November. Yes, that's Thanksgiving here in the United States, therefore it will be earlier in the morning. Today we have quite a bit to cover here, namely the question, are there positive or negative emotions? So we're going to learn about the energetic component of emotions and the emotional expression. And that was one of the big ahas that we had in part 1, namely that there's a huge big difference between having an emotion and how we are emoting it, yeah, how we are expressing our emotion. And you heard me say things about anger being actually the more powerful emotional state. So we also started to think about states, which we will go into much deeper today, and investigate the feelings and the energetic quality of our emotions. This can greatly help you when it comes to finding the right expression. So we learned last time that sometimes in some situations it can be quite difficult to find the right expression, and that's where most of us get stuck. That's why we have these preoccupations or bias in some cases with specific emotions. And today I want to help you to differentiate this a little more. Also, another thing that we talked about last time, and thanks to your wonderful sharing and your wonderful questions. So please ask questions. Yeah, we dove deep into the purpose and also, well, the meaning of emotional processing. Yeah, and we kind of came to the conclusion with all these informational pieces that allowed us to verify our own emotional experience a bit, that it is necessary for us to become aware of our unconscious expressions, because if it's really about the expression and not the emotion itself, well, that's actually a message of hope. That means we can change things. We don't need to be afraid of certain emotions. We don't need to sequester or monitor ourselves, for as long as we have good ways good in the sense of, fundamentally, cooperative ways. There are ways that can help us to resolve things, that can help us to reconcile, that can help us to solve conflicts or disagreements, and ultimately situations that allow us to grow. Yeah, so that's what we need, perhaps a little more differentiation. And you've heard me say this a bunch of times already. There's obviously all the things that we have to deal with that can inhibit that can make it harder for us, and one of which is trauma. But there's also some other things that can be, just for us as individuals in the way of, well, expressing ourselves in a better or healthier way. Yeah, so things that can impede our higher expression are, for example, a general fear of confrontation. Yeah, this is something that most empaths and energetically sensitives share as a preoccupation. We just don't like it. And there are some deeper aspects about that, namely us not wanting other people to feel in a certain way. But there can also be things such as unmet needs, yeah, like things that we're not getting, and it can lead to passive aggressiveness or, all sorts of, sort of indirect or covert expression of our emotions, which, thanks to your guys' questions, could be clarified last time. It's always good to express your true emotions. So it's not about holding back or blurting everything out either. It's about finding the right expression, and that requires us to be able to be free, yeah, to be able to see what is the context, what is the person, or who's the person that I'm talking to, yeah, what is the goal here, yeah, is this a meaningful relationship, or is this just a stranger that I met? These things all play into what a good or healthy expression is. Yeah. Last but not least, it also showed us that there's quite a bit of bias that we have, yeah, like things that we believe should be in a certain way, yeah, that they're done in a certain way, or that we can't really change them because that's how it's always been done, or simply because we have been conditioned, yeah, in this way to react in this way. The cultural aspects play a big role here. Yeah, what is okay in your culture, in your ethnic group, and that can lead to a bunch of misunderstandings, but it can also just simply lead to frustrations between people, and and that also then really prevent growth in relationships. So it is important that we always express our emotions, but that obviously requires us to be fully aware of our emotions, and that's where we want to go today. We want to investigate, yeah, how our emotions form, yeah, and who is the one that is having the information, the emotion, and who's the one who's expressing the emotion. I want to start off with this quote here. This was from October, from the 20-minute energy alignment MP3. Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, because they become your actions. Watch your actions as they become your habits. Watch your habits as they become your character. Watch your character where it becomes your destiny. So that's a quote from Lao Tzu. And the relevance is in conjunction with our expressions, and obviously also the words and the vocabulary that we form in the process of this awareness making, is that we produce quite a lot of reactions or responses in, and this may be a new thought process for you, not just in the person that we are expressing or saying things to, but also the universe, also our own higher self. Yes, because the words that we choose, the ways that we express things, whether they're unconscious or conscious, they are codes, they are energies, and those determine more or less the attitude and also the perspectives that we have, and with it the perception that we have about something. Yeah, so as an example, if we have a quite hostile attitude toward other people or towards 3D altogether, yeah, which is kind of like a new age thing, to believe that it's a punishment to be here in 3D, well, then we're more likely to interpret and react negatively, yeah, to other people. If we see life as a gift, if we see all the opportunities and all the wonders, if we are able to see the good and the beautiful in this world, then we can also see that our ways of expressing ourselves are an act or become an act of our conscious creation if they are conscious. Yeah? So a lot of times people have difficulties with discerning karma and fate and all these things. Yeah, here in this case, destiny. Because they're not really aware of what it actually is that they're sending out as their overall expression. It's like the order form to the universe, if you will. And I want to say a few words about this. This is something that came up here during the karmic clearing and also during the grace redemption transmission. Those are energy sessions that go on here in transCODES for people who want to stay in training. And that has to do with our relationship with our higher self or with our soul self. I want to hijack your thoughts here for a moment and go into a spiritual process with me, which requires you first and foremost to agree that the higher self in you, if you will, the soul self in you, that's fundamentally a spirit being, right? I mean, let's just have that sink in for a moment. We use these words without actually being aware of what it means. Yeah? So when we talk about our soul, we're talking about a spirit being. And when we talk about spirit, we typically talk about, something outside of us. Yeah, something like, the divine or source or God. All right. But what we don't really see here as this glue between the two of them, yeah, the thing that connects it both is that we're both coming from the same place. We, as in our soul self, the spirit being in us, and source or spirit itself. We're intrinsically connected. And so as we are living our life in 3D, yeah, regardless of what your belief system is, we are fundamentally experiencing our 3D life on, well, or through two different perspectives. We're experiencing it through our ego, which is, bound to 3D, to this body, yeah, the beginning and the end of everything, the dualisms that come with that, and all the fears and all the anger and the pain and so forth. Yeah, so let's just establish that here, that a lot of this, what we often, interpret as negative experience, suffering in 3D, is only really bound to 3D. Okay, the soul self, the higher self in us, that exists simultaneously, that records it all, that witnesses it with us, does not really connect with that because it doesn't have a 3D existence. Yeah, it's a higher dimensional existence. And in that, it can recognize that it is, emotionally disturbing for you, say, what you're going through right now, but it doesn't feel it. It communicates with us through imageries, through our visions, through that which we are feeling, that which we are sending through our feelings. And this is very, very important for you guys. Because if you have a negative attitude to a 3D, yeah, then that feeling that occurs in you, yes, to a 3D, your 3D life, is transported to your soul self as a very, yeah, well, negative, ragged, ugly kind of imagery. Yeah, anyone who's ever seen the works of Masaru Emoto, who had investigated the structure of water crystals, depending on what feelings or even what kind of words you program water, in a water bottle, for example, with, influences the form, influences the shape of this crystal. And that's how you can imagine how this imagery that we are transporting to our soul self is formed. It's a crystalline structure. And when we send out these, victimhood, anger, all these things into the core of our being, all right, then that comes across. Yeah, and this is the cool thing. I'm not just repeating some spiritual teachings here. I can see this as a cool thing as an energy reader. You can see this in people. It forms ragged, asymmetrical, and sometimes straight out, demonic looking energy around you in the etheric. If you, however, align yourself to higher vibratory vibrations, yeah, such as forgiveness, compassion, understanding, empathy, love, healing, joy, abundance, you are painting a picture that is so exquisite and beautiful that it's like music in the ears of our soul self. It's this moment of excellence where you listen to a piece of music or you watch a painting and you're deeply, deeply moved. And that's exactly how leaves our expressions, guys. Yeah. And if that's maybe something that you can take away from this workshop, spiritual connection that we have, the energetic quality of that, these signals that we are sending out. Remember, I talked about energies being two-way. They're never just one way. We don't just receive things. We also I'm getting a little bit of um, mixed signals here from the internet. As many of you know, we just went through another hurricane. It's okay, but it's still a little shaky. So I hope that it will last through the workshop. So let me just summarize here. Emotions are vibrations triggered by what you hear, see, or sense, express, or think, sending signals to your body and to your nervous system via your eardrum, your neurotransmitters. So your body actually perceives all these vibrations, like light, yeah, and all that it does in you as a very physical experience. Your soul experiences it as an image, as something that takes on form in the or on the etheric level. And this is the reason why so many of us have a bit of an overlap and also sometimes a hard time differentiating between our energetic sensations and our physical sensations. Yeah, and that's it's instrumental for us to know the difference. Yeah, so last time I had to erase it, unfortunately. Last time we discovered that the way we process signals can be quite different from person to person. And perhaps you've learned here, I've used these different layers of our self-awareness as a basically as a cheat sheet, yeah, for us to remember that wherever we start experiencing ourselves, doesn't matter, it permeates all these levels, but it helps us to understand which of these signals we are prioritizing. Yeah, we are giving more meaning, for example. Yeah, so some of you discovered that you often experience things that you see or hear in your body first, and that then produces an emotion, and that you then have some kind of thought or judgment about it. I said something about retrofitting our thoughts or rationalizations last time. This was maybe hard to understand, but really what I meant to say with this is that we are responding, yeah, in a hardwired way here between the red, the orange, and the yellow. And it's often not aware to us which it is that we are prioritizing. Yeah. And I gave an example of myself and how long it took me to figure this out. So ultimately, where it starts doesn't really matter. It's just important for us to know that. Yeah. So many of us have a slight disconnection with our body, and this can arise if we primarily experience ourselves through our energetic self. Yeah, the differentiation between energetic and spiritual here is not very common. You can only see this, done by someone who really sees the difference. Okay, so there's a big difference between how I see myself spiritually and how I see myself energetically. So energetic perception, yeah, and self-awareness is not, I don't want to say it's more important, but it really helps to differentiate the other four. Yeah, because it can show us the truth level. It can show us this imagery that I talked about. Yeah, what is formed in the etheric through, our sensations, emotions, and thoughts, and ultimately also our beliefs. Yeah, so quick example here, if somebody is very religious and let's say was brought up Christian and believes in angels and demons, then this imagery will most likely, resemble some of these angel and demon pictures. If somebody grew up in a more, say, tribal society, or, just a very simple, a very different sort of, as you all know, I'm Icelandic, and for me, the sort of the spiritual images that I have are not necessarily Christian. Then they're not against it either, but I see other things as well. They're part of my culture. I was raised with those fables, with those stories, with those symbols, yeah, that are kind of hardwired in how my brain interprets the things that I'm seeing. But regardless of that, the forms that my etheric takes on are not necessarily limited to that. So we're not limited to our upbringing, to our conditioning when it comes to the energetic form that our thoughts, our attitudes take on, but they're often, if this isn't trained, if this person hasn't trained any of these more metaphysical or spiritual or cosmological teachings, okay, then it will most likely be reduced to, whatever you grew up with. So I want you to know that this is highly mutable and that there's a lot of development that can take place. And when somebody works and trains their energetic perception, they can also see themselves more, they're not really limited to the original programming. And that's then what we use for healing, because if this can transform, all right, this means that I can take every thought, every emotion, every physical sensation, including pain, and transform it. And if I can transform it, that also means that I can heal it, that I can turn something that, let's say, takes on an asymmetrical, imbalanced, and ugly form, yeah, from me, which I would subjectively experience as negative. I can turn that into a beautiful, creative, and wonderful, heavenly or celestial form, and therefore transform whatever it was, yeah, an emotion, a thought, a judgment, a belief, or a pain, into a higher vibratory version. So this was a bit technical, but I wanted to send this up front because it's important to have that thought in the back of your mind. This has to do with the fact that everything is energy. And whether you say it or not, that was a question that came last time, only matters in human interaction. But what you feel, what you sense, what your attitudes are, always matters in the energetic. Okay? In the energetic, it doesn't matter so much how you say it. What matters is the energetic quality underneath what you say. And this is the bottom line here of energy healing and self-healing, is that we recognize that no matter what form we think we're giving things, okay, there's a level on which that can be read, on which that can be seen as it is. It can be known as it is. And for energetically sensitives, that's a big challenge, because you so often pick up on other people's sentiments, even though they say something completely different or do something completely different. And this often leads to schisms in you, yeah, or, you know, things that have to do with questioning yourself. So I want you to know that there is something like the ability to read out truth, but it has to do with the person's own alignment. So if you believe that your ego is in charge and that it is the one that creates, then that is what you're going to see. If you, however, recognize that consciousness is much higher in pay grade, and that consciousness can observe your ego, just alone that fact tells you that there is a higher pay grade than your ego, yeah? Regardless of your belief system. If you have a belief, if you believe in God, then you must understand that God is, of course, above your ego. Of course it is. There's no such thing as the ego creates. The ego handles and the ego manages, but it doesn't create. Whether or not you see yourself as co-creator, that has to do with, you know, what you allow yourself, how much space you give, and, you know, what your relationship to the divine, to spirit is. But if we take that as our fundamental presumption, yeah, that there's something like an energetic quality of everything that we bring into this world through our deeds, through our sensing, emoting, thinking, and choosing, then let me ask you now what your view is. If it's still that simple, that there's positive and negative emotions, are there positive and negative emotions. What's your current view? What are your thoughts? How is this processing in you? What do you believe? Go ahead, Linda. Your microphone is open.
I think I believe that when it's emotion, that it comes from my ego, and it can be positive or negative, but that my higher vibratory sees it more as just a fact.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. You said quite a few things here in that one sentence. And I like that you said you believe, okay, because we can't really be sure, right? I mean,
For
you know,
sure.
we can investigate it. So let's investigate this here together. Okay, there's one statement. When you have emotions, it comes from your ego. That's a statement that you have as a belief. Is that true? Emotions come from the ego. Is that true?
If you're letting me mark my own paper, then.
Or are you talking about judgments?
I know that judgment comes from my ego.
Now, how does judgment fit into this?
I don't know. Is it judgment that tells me whether they're positive or negative? That doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah, that's exactly what judgment is. Judgment is a process in us that decides whether something is positive or negative. What is that judgment ruled by? What's it determined by?
And can we say that it's the constructs and the belief systems that we hold that give us like an opinion?
Yeah, that's a very good conclusion. It's an opinion. A judgment is an opinion. Oh,
And it's only based on what we have learned and known from our past, and even what society tells us. And you know, and then I was thinking before that the positive and negative emotions, they're not really positive or negative, in a sense that some things drop us into a lower state and some take us to a slightly higher state than before. Like when you were talking about anger, like if I'm in desolation, and then if I have anger come forward all of a sudden, like get angry about something, it gives me a bit more energy to shift things and change, because as you were talking about at the beginning, I think that anger is a powerful sort of energy. It makes us move. It rises upwards, whereas despondency pushes us down, and we actually just like want to lie down and curl up in a ball energetically.
yeah. So that's why I switched here to the emotion wheel, right? This is just, you know, a few here. I never counted them. What is this? 2, 4, 5 different, 6 times 30, and then, yeah, like, I don't know, 150 different kind of descriptors for emotions. Yeah, but it's a little too simple to say that there are positive and negative emotions, because
yeah, and sadness
really
doesn't want to know.
it's just the opinion about it, and that opinion forms at some point of our life. based on our experiences with it, with
Mm.
having that emotion. But we found out last time, like you said, Julianne, it's not really the emotion itself. It's how we handle it. It's how we express it. Yeah. That makes us either feel negative about it or that makes us judge that it was a bad thing. So really what we're judging are the expressions, right? The form. This is a big sort of rewiring in our brain, okay, when we realize that emotions in and of itself are neither good nor bad.
Mm.
It is what they do to us, yeah, how they make us feel, how they, you know, either empower us or inhibit us, yeah, to make choices. I'm extremely grateful for my anger today, yeah, because I realized that anger is a signal. Yeah, that's why I like calling emotions inner signals, right? That tells me, for example, when a limit is reached or when a boundary is broken or violated, or when, and this is something that I constantly have to deal with every day. For example, when I'm hungry and tired, yeah, hangry when I'm hangry, okay. Yeah, anger can come up in me through so many different things that have nothing to do with the emotion itself or the people involved. Yeah, Linda, you're having a big aha right now. This is very, very important. This is a misconception that there are positive or negative emotions. It's not the emotions themselves, guys. It's what they do to us and how they influence, how they determine how we express ourselves as a consequence of feeling those emotions. And I've mentioned a few times last time that the majority of people, you know, not just the ones that I work with, just in general, you know, base their choices on their emotions. So it is understandable that we have a misconception here, because to a degree, if we never train this, if we never investigate this, we all kind of feel like victim of our emotions, isn't it? We feel that we can't control our emotions. And that's why we have, you know, these two compartments, good and bad. And now think about it. Which emotions do you put into the good compartment and which do you put into the bad compartment? Without reflection. Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned anger here. Okay, that's an easy one.
Your love and joy are the good emotions.
Okay. There's nothing that creates more pain in people than love, you know. So I mean, you know, I can be just a devil's advocate here, you know. Yeah, yeah, joy, of course.
It's really a preference, isn't it? Is to feel joy over sadness.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what does sadness tell us? What does it inform us about? You can look at the screen here as some suggestions. Because when
Yeah.
somebody says that they're sad, I always ask them, what kind of sadness? Yeah, yeah. We can take the sadness can inform us about the disappointment. Maybe where an expectation we had didn't come to fruition or didn't realize. Maybe it
And
was because we had an unrealistic expectation. Who knows?
that's
Yeah.
right, but it's healthy too. That sadness is
Yeah.
healthy. It shows
Yeah.
us that, you know, it's okay to feel these emotions, but when it becomes unhealthy is when we ruminate and stay there, or then also possibly feel that I'm to blame, or going deeper, you know, down the spiral of like, I'm so bad, or what did I do? It's my fault, or like going down that spiral. And it's actually like identifying then
Yes.
that I am the sadness, I am the disappointment.
Yeah, this is obviously difficult to feel in that moment because, you know, these heavier emotions, yeah, they feel heavy on us. Yeah, they feel discomforting. The ego immediately jumps into avoidance. It doesn't want that. It resists it. Who wants to feel pain? Nobody wants to feel pain. Nobody wants to feel shame. Nobody wants to feel powerless. Okay, so we have an ego judgment here about certain types of emotions that, after all, if we stay neutral, are informing us about something. But this resistance then leads to us not wanting to go there, or, you know, having even more, and this is the downward spiral that you mentioned, Julia, more negative feelings about the feeling that we have, the emotion that we have. Yeah, no, I don't want to feel pain. Oh, this is so bad. I'm such a victim, and this is so unfair. And oh my God, and everybody should pity me, and what, you know, like all that. But if you think about it, just how I enacted this just right now, a lot of that comes from the constructs. And the constructs, Julian, you're right. Where are they coming from? They come from the mind. It is our attitude towards certain emotions, yeah, and the judgment that we have toward it, which is formed in our mind, okay, that make us resist these emotions. And resisting in energetic terms always means that we're trying to avoid it, that we're trying to get out of it, that we're trying to, well, brush over it instead of, and this is, you know, a bit counterintuitive, especially for the lower vibratory states, instead of feeling into it and what it informs us about.
Mm-hmm. And we can make excuses too. I mean, I can feel myself sometimes going into this. Yeah, well, it's the outer, it's a zombie apocalypse. Of course I fail, or something like that. So it's just putting everything, externalizing, instead of taking responsibility and like feeling into what that emotion and thought is showing me is what I'm actually putting my focus on.
Exactly.
And energy. Like,
it distracts. Yes,
it
it distracts. It's a total distraction. All our constructs are distractions, whether it's conspiracies, you know, that our mind makes up, or whether it's self-bashing, yeah, self-judgment, or, you know, injustice, victimhood, type of things. You can name many different processes that can lead to sort of not wanting to experience something. But when it's there, it's there. Yeah. And you mentioned something about externalizing. This is a question that comes up a lot, and that is among, you know, energetically sensitives and empaths, sort of the $1 million question. Okay, if I'm feeling in a certain way, if I'm having certain emotions, yeah, pick one. Yeah, let's say whatever, hopeless. Okay, is this an emotion that came out of me, or is this an emotion that came from the outside and I just absorbed it? You guys ever asked yourself that question? I mean, Julianne, you just basically implied that, yeah, that you sometimes feel things that you're kind of set up to feel, or that are triggered by the outside. Anger is also a good example. There's a mechanism in us.
What I noticed today with anger, I know you talk about, okay, maybe we're envisioning a current situation or being affected by the collective, and if it's outside, or am I feeling hopeless because of my own personal situation. But then I also noticed that, I guess this is just unresolved anger, then triggering something in the present. Is it something unresolved within me? Which is almost like I can't say it's almost like an external thing, but it's not really connected to what's going on in the present moment. Like suddenly the book falls off the shelf and I'm angry, but I can't, the two don't really connect. It's
Yeah,
something else.
It's a really good point you're making there. A lot of this has to do with projection. Yeah, a lot of times where our brain or our ego tries to make a connection and says, "Oh, I'm angry because," all right. Often that's not even connected. Often it's something that we've carried around with us, especially if it comes out in an explosive way. Yeah, it comes out in a way that is uncontrollable for us because it is unresolved, because there is things that we have not processed in the right way. It's not always that we haven't processed it at all. A lot of times it's that we haven't processed it in the right way. Remember when we talked about the order in which our emotions process. Yeah, so if I'm someone who is very tactile and I experience my emotions through my body a lot, yeah, then take fear, for example, yeah, then this continual unresolved fear in me can lead to anxiety, because anxiety would be a clinical definition of an actual physiological state. Yeah, so I have not resolved the fear that I have, and therefore my body goes into like an overreaction to it, and now my body is in a continual state of hypervigilance or hypersensitivity or hyper stressed out. Yeah, that everything that happens, yeah, no matter what it is, can trigger that emotion in me, that fear emotion. So you're very right about this, Janet, that a lot of times what our ego deems as the cause for a certain emotion often isn't the true cause. It is something maybe on the surface, and it may look that way. Just like how for kids, sort of simultaneous things that happen, like say you're angry and the wind slams the door. Okay, that can lead to a hardwire in your child that every time mom is mad at me, the door slams. Yeah, so making connections on a superficial level where we actually disregard what is really happening. That's another aspect of that. But the point here that I wanted to get at is, and this has to do with who actually has the emotion. Yeah, when we say something like Julianne said earlier, there's say, that I report about collective energy, so it's not a secret that there are energies that surround us, everything. Yeah, I mean, just take it as it is. Every sentiment, yeah, is a form of energy, and that can transform into an emotion. So there's a lot of sentiments out there, a lot of judgments, a lot of opinions right now, and they're pretty intense. So obviously the exposure that we have right now in regards to these outer energies is pretty intense, and it can trigger pretty intense emotions in us. But is that really the cause? Yeah, is the outside really the cause? Isn't the one that is having the emotion, okay, the one that carries the signal. Yeah, if you're in a super, super good mood and you walk down the street and you're like, I don't know, you just had a success with something, or you just really, really connected, and somebody shows you a finger or, you know, says something mean to you, you may not be affected by that at all in that state. But when you already, you know, a little depressed, say, or you feel helpless, and somebody says something to you that, you know, throws you off to a point where it doesn't just affect you in that moment where that person says that, you carry this home with you, and you go into this and, you know, allow this to pull you further down. Yeah, then we must ask, where does this come from? Who is in charge here? Is my fear of, you know, absorbing emotions from others, is that really a valid fear, or is this another distraction? Because if it is me who is having the emotion and it sticks in it, I mean, other people can project stuff onto you all day long, but that doesn't mean that they're responsible for you feeling in a certain way. Have you ever heard this? Nobody can make you feel in a certain way. That's your choice. Or sometimes you don't have a choice, yeah, because it's not differentiated enough in us. Yeah, so we allow somebody, a stranger on the street who says something mean to us, to ruin our day. But it was in our power to choose whether we allow that to happen or not. Just follow me into that rabbit hole. Why is it that we allow that?
Because there's something in us that believes it to be true. Like there's some aspect within us that may question, oh, is it true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what do you think when you take Janet's statement from earlier into the equation, that there may be something unresolved underneath that, and that person just triggered something. It was just an instrument for a trigger. The emotion itself is in you.
Well, could part of it too be like what I said, but also kind of worst case scenario being that it feeds the ego, it feeds your already running story,
Mm-hmm.
it feeds the negativity that feels so comfortable.
Mm. And we can
from
make
the stranger point of view kind of thing, because I kind of looking at what you're asking and saying, well, you know, the stranger on the street, in most cases, yeah, and yeah, you could reflect on what it's triggering, but in a more intimate relationship, a little closer relationship that you have ongoing commitment to work through and be your highest expression, that it might be easier to, it might be more, I guess, more worthwhile, have more validity to stop and really see that it's a reaction. What does it bring up, and what should I care about, essentially? Like what I want to care about this, what needs healing, I guess.
I totally agree with you. And I couldn't agree with you more, because really what you're doing here is differentiating everything that's going on, and you're coming up with, you know, a differentiation. This is important to me, this is not important to me. Yeah, so in that moment where you choose to care for something more than you would for a stranger, okay, you're differentiating, you're in control. I mean, guys, don't get me wrong, okay? I've had times in my life where I was so low that if somebody said something to me on, walking my dogs, they could make me cry. They could turn me into like a ball of depressed combobulations for the rest of the day. And Julianne, it wasn't that I thought that it may be true. It wasn't that. It was just, that the meanness itself, yeah, or the ugliness itself, yeah, that pulled me down. So that's undifferentiated. I sometimes use the word not very sophisticated. Okay, if we take everything that comes along, yeah, and make it important without differentiating it, without discerning whether it has meaning or any kind of importance to us, all right, yeah, then we are screwed. Then we are a ping pong ball of I don't know, the big ugly, because the big ugly is what we're experiencing here in our societies right now.
And I was feeling also into it's that pain body that gets triggered if somebody comes along and says something. I think my thought of believing it to be true was really referring to it feeds that within me. It triggers something.
Exactly. And that's unresolved. Yeah.
And that's the unresolved piece. Yeah. And
exactly.
when it's triggered, it's a inverted commas opportunity to stop, like Janet was saying, and really discern. Well, hang on a minute. It's in that space where that is like the piece of gold, I suppose, to actually look at something that has come up that's unresolved.
It doesn't even always have to lead to you having like this huge big insight, but staying neutral with this and asking yourself, wait, why is this triggering me? What's going on? What's underneath this? Yeah. Like you said, oh, maybe the fear that it might be true. So let's say, yeah, somebody in road rage or, just some crazy person or whatever on the street says, you bitch, or something like that. I mean,
yeah, but I could admit to myself a bit later, oh, actually, that was rude of me. It's justifiable, okay, and then
yeah, you could also just decide that that's like a crazy person, and that or that the person has an anger management problem.
Yeah,
that has nothing to do with you. Yeah. So this ability to discern whether or not it has anything to do with you. Yeah, whether it's even meant for you. Okay, that needs to come through this neutral investigation. You first have to become aware of the quality of your emotions, then the quality of your expressions, and then you have to become aware of what's underneath all that. Yeah, what's the, like Janet called it, unresolved aspect here, that something can even trigger me that much. I used to call them shit magnets. Yeah, I gotta have something in me that this can even sort of dock on. And this is what we often forget. Things, yeah, that can throw us into this downward spiral. They're not there, out of nowhere. They happen all the time. But once in a while, and depending on, the overall state that you're in, perhaps more frequently than for others, they will latch on. And you'll start identifying, like you said, Julian. You'll start like, oh, and then you take it on. And what we not realize here is that there's a choice that we're making. Has anybody of you ever been in a state of total elation? Like even if it was just for a day or a couple of hours. Do you guys know what it feels like to feel really good about yourself, about the world? I mean, even with seeing all this stuff, but okay. Yeah.
When it's all rainbows and sunshine.
Yeah. On those days, you don't even see, or it doesn't even happen to you. But people walk up to you and say, you bitch, or blah, blah, blah. And you know what? Even if it did, you'd forget it. You wouldn't pay attention to it. You wouldn't give it a lot of meaning. Now, again, and I agree with you here, Janet, if it is a relationship that matters to you, that's different. But even then, you still have a choice. Let's say you are committed. Let's say, what does commitment mean? Commitment means that you've made a promise, or that you've, somehow invested in something. Okay. And now the other person does something that disappoints you. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah, that kind of thing would mean you don't know what it is until it's resolved. Like they don't call for a day, let's say, and you're supposed to talk, and then suddenly there goes all the little bells and whistles, possibly, unless really centered, which is possible, but suddenly there's all sorts of coping mechanisms that come in and things like that. And until there's communication to close that gap, there's so many possibilities, it seems. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, the communication part is obviously the one that people whom it matters. Yeah, that you can use as a tool. Yeah, that's a tool to reconcile, to grow, to mend and so forth. So, we've talked about this last time, but I want to go a step deeper here. What does this mean? Okay, let's say you've been married for 15 years, and yes, Julian, it's the right, and say it into the microphone so that everybody can hear it. And suddenly your partner or whomever it concerns does something that, goes against that unspoken commitment. What does this tell you? What is this informing you about? It doesn't necessarily ring on bells and whistles or red flags that there's something wrong with the other person. No, first and foremost, it informs you that whatever it is that is happening right now is not according to your expectations or your values. Now comes the question, do I have the right to have that expectation, or is that an appropriate expectation, or have I even expressed my values to the other person? Yeah, okay, let's say you have. Okay. And then what about the other person's freedom to choose for themselves? What
Well,
about the other person's freedom to have their own values?
in a committed relationship, at least, again, here, this is what my value would be, is that would already be spelled out. That it's like,
Okay.
well, or obviously you all didn't do that ahead of time, so now is a chance to take a look at it and get a little bit more specific if that's a value
Yes.
and you have.
Yes, yeah, like especially if it's at the beginning of a relationship, it's very important that that's being spelled out, and that the boundaries and that the expectations are being communicated. I absolutely 100% agree with you, because a lot of times we have assumptions, but a lot of times we have all kinds of stories going on in our heads, and those are the ones then that ultimately decide how we handle things. Yeah, so again, let's say, when you're in a relationship and there's, something that you value very highly, but your partner doesn't. Yeah, we've had this in other workshops. For example, your spiritual interest altogether. That's a very common problem in relationships. Yeah, it's very common that, especially women who feel this innate spiritual interest feel like they can't share this with their partners because their partners aren't interested, or they disregard it or minimize it. Okay, And let's say you know, something slips from your mouth and you make a comment about something that happens on TV or whatever, and you say something like along the lines of something simple, maybe that, oh, that's karma or whatever. Okay, and you know, you get a really sort of demeaning response. And you hurt, you're disappointed or angry. So now what? What are you going to do with this?
Well, I think it's to express. If you're in a committed relationship and you're feeling like that, you can't push that down, that you're feeling hurt about the comment, but to do it in a way that's, if I already know that my partner's not into karma or any of these belief systems that I hold the same, then you can ask, you know, oh, well, I don't know, maybe that be more aware of not saying, oh, that's karma out loud. I don't know.
You mean like avoiding that, not talking
Yeah,
about your own beliefs?
well, if you're looking at the TV and you're going, oh, that's their karma, and the husband has a degrading remark, maybe it could just be, well, you don't have to be degrading about it. It's my belief system. You know that that's the stuff I believe in. So
that's
you know,
standing your ground. Yes,
yeah,
you can
and
choose to stand your ground instead of being angry or disappointed, right? You can just say, hey, yeah, that's demeaning how you just responded. Yeah, that's my belief. You don't have to agree with it, but sort of as a minimum agreement between us, you know, don't be degrading or demeaning about things that I believe in, right? You can stand your ground. Okay, that's a good alternative to being
and as long as
disappointed.
that's right, and as long as I know that I'm not pushing my view also, you know, that sort of like underhanded way, like starting to push things across and nudging at the other person, to that can make the other person react, because they
Right.
can
Why do
feel,
we do that though? Follow the trail here. Why do
yeah,
we do that?
why do we do it is because it's covert. It's actually underneath. We're not happy with our partner. We want them to be different.
Yeah, I mean, you know, 2-3 steps down the line, that you may come to that conclusion. But first, you have to realize that, you know, your attempts to convince the other of something, okay, it actually comes from your ego.
Yeah,
Because,
it's my own belief of my ego.
yeah, I mean, you know, like there's nothing wrong with having beliefs. Yeah, and you know, the freedom we take, we also, at least from a higher vibratory point of view, we want to give that same freedom to others. Okay, but what is our problem then with, you know, let's say somebody doesn't say anything degrading, isn't demeaning, not obvious, but you know, just kind of ignores it, or you know, expresses that they disagree with that. Why do we want them to have the same opinion or the same belief?
Well, kind of in a close relationship, like if this is a man and a woman and they want to be in a strong relationship, there's each has their individual, then there's the us, there's like an us feeling. So I think if you're sensitive at all, that you're kind of always wanting to go for that, or I've noticed that it would be this equanimity around things, like nothing is going to step in and cause like this big negative stake to be in the way, especially one's views on karma that aren't even clear to most people. So
yeah, but what's wrong about just agreeing on having a disagreement? Or,
well, that's fine. I guess when what I would discern is the person putting me down? You know, is it degrading me as a person, or is it just kind of the concept? And then you can flip your thinking around, go, well, maybe they're scared, maybe they don't understand. And it could be, you know, you could be like, hey, do you ever want to discuss this more? Because obviously we don't agree about it. And it would be nice to either agree or just kind of see why you would have to be so negative about it.
Right, but then we also have to go yet another step deeper and ask ourselves why it is so important for us to agree.
It's an ego underneath wanting to be right and having that control, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, what's wanting to be right? What is that?
my views are the only view, and not having the freedom to just let somebody else be in their expression and me in my expression and being okay with it.
Well, wait, stop. Sorry for interrupting here, but Janet just cleared this up for us. She said that, it's about the expression, okay? So you can disagree with me, yeah, but don't do it in a demeaning way. Yeah, so we have a right to criticize that. We have a right to criticize the expression. But we don't have a right to criticize a person's perspective. We can, yes, I like that, Janet, suggest that we discuss it. Yeah, that's all right. We can do that if both want to do that. But really what we're realizing here again is that there's a difference between having an inner reaction and with it an emotion. Yeah, and what this is triggered by. Is it by what they're saying, what the belief is behind that, or is it the form of how they're saying it? So that needs to be differentiated first. When we try to convince somebody, okay, yes, you're right, Julian, it is about, it's a form of control. We were trying to be right, but why do we want to be right? Why is this even important to us? I mean, what's the opposite of being right?
Yeah, that we're wrong, that our beliefs are not true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, wrong and true, or right and true are also two different things, really. But I hear what you're saying. Yes, that's right. That's how we feel, right? When somebody disagrees with us, at first it feels like we're being wronged.
And it's really a feeling of, I suppose, when I'm identified with my ego, if somebody doesn't agree with me, it can feel that it's a blight against me as a
Mm-hmm.
as a soul, as a being. It's like, oh my God, that feeling of,
It's identification.
you don't like me. Yes, that you mustn't like me, that because you don't agree with me, then there's something that you don't like in me.
Yes.
And that's the identification of the.
Yes. And when identification happens, it's never about what was said or the belief that is being expressed. Is about something else.
Yeah. It triggers something older, like I'm not worthy, or I'm useless, I'm not important, or even just fear. Like I've noticed what's deep underneath that is just plain old fear of loss, of abandonment.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you guys can see that. It's a need for validation. Yeah, because if we don't, that's what the ego says. If we don't get this validation, well, then we are nothing. I mean, the ego always sees everything as black and white, as all or nothing. And that can then drive our lower expressions, our, trying to convince somebody or getting in a fight with somebody or, blah, blah, blah. All that. Those are all just expressions. But what it's truly about, we never actually get to talk about. We never actually get to resolve that. And that's where the the sophistication comes in and the training, that you realize what it's truly about, and that you focus on that, and only on that, because that is what resolves, that is what mends, that is what heals. This is extremely challenging, especially in love relationships, or say relationships with our children or with our parents, because this fear that you just mentioned, Janet, sits so deep, yeah, that if we're not validated, if we're not getting what we need, yeah, that then we cease to exist. It sounds a bit exaggerated, but that's really how our ego thinks. Okay, that's what it's really about. And only through this kind of investigation, obviously, when we're in such situations, it's not easy to do this, yeah, to do this online, to do this in real time. Yeah, we have to discipline our own emotions in those moments.
It's so valuable to be able to sit here right now. And I mean, everybody, hopefully, I mean, I'm like, yeah, I noticed it earlier, but now here's some more dedicated time, and just know it's there. Just know it's there. You know, like, you know, the edge of the carpet is a bit frayed, so you try not to trip on it every single day until it gets fixed. Just, you know, it's good to, it's so valuable, Jona, to be able to have the time to recognize it, that there's something deeper other than just psychology or couples, you know, handbooks and stuff like that.
Yeah, so this is this comes to show you the big difference between emoting and feeling. Okay, so we can have emotions, but the true feeling underneath it, yeah, which here seen through the energetic lens, informs us about the energetic quality of what it actually is, that we are the signal of the signal that we're getting there. And there's something about the intensity of that, yeah, that can allow us to recognize, for example, well, how deep it is, how old, I think you called it old earlier, yeah, like, you know, how big it is. And most people run around in their life with huge, big, unresolved stuff, with a bunch of stories and narratives around it, for only one purpose: to actually avoid going into that unresolved place. And this is where our ego clashes with our true self, guys, because if it's really about, you know, wanting to be loved or wanting to be validated, or, you know, these kind of needs that we have, right? Do we actually have a chance to ever resolve it if we never really address it? No, we don't. And so the question that must arise in us then is about our emotions. Yeah, when we look at emotions from a perspective of like, okay, you know, there's big emotions and there's small emotions. Okay, there's things that, you know, they trigger us in a certain way, but they trigger us in different ways at different times. So it can't be the emotion itself. It must be something else. And that's where we want to look at the terrain. We want to look at the state that we're in. And what you see here on your screen, liberating yourself from your energetic ties and karmic binds, is the beginning of true healing. And the foundation for higher consciousness is, you know, the November model, basically. Yeah, understanding that some things are so deep or old or whatever, you know, however you want to call this, yeah, that They don't have anything to do with anybody. They may come forward through a partner or through a child or through a parent. But it's not really what it's about. And some things only come forward when we are in specific states. So let's look at the states. Okay, so I suggest everybody here, and I mentioned this many times, that we work with Hawkins's calibrated states or levels of consciousness. And this is a bit augmented version here. It shows us multiple perspectives, yeah, namely how we, subjectively experience those states. And what you can see here is what we talked about earlier in regards to anger. For example, that anger, so there's a scale from 0 to 1,000, actually is a logarithmic scale. Now here you can see the numeric values. This is the energetic value that a certain state has. You can see that anger indeed actually has a higher vibratory rate than fear, than pain, and shame. All right. And that indeed, seen from an energetic point of view, yes, it can come in these expressions. It can make you want to counterattack or defend. It can trigger disdain, resentment, all these kinds of, expressions of anger in you, and can lead to all sorts of things, including conflict and, vengeance and so forth, deflection. Those are all just different versions of the same energetic state. Those are the lower expressions here. But when we talked about anger, it can be a springboard, for example, finding the courage to change something, finding the courage to let something go, finding the courage or the power to detach from something, to say finally, no more, I've had it, this is it. Okay, well, then you can see that, your expressions can be much higher. So these aren't emotions, guys. These are emotional states. And depending on the expressions that we choose, yeah, so when we are in our ego, you're right. We typically choose the lower vibratory expressions. And that's why we go against the emotions themselves, which is a big mistake. We talked about grief last time. Yeah, how grief is an important process psychologically. Even pain. Pain is an extremely important tool for learning. Shame also. Shame informs us about, social rules and what's appropriate and what isn't. Or perhaps also reminds us of our own values, such as guilt as well. Yeah, so in psychology, they typically talk about healthy and unhealthy guilt or shame or pain or fear. All right. From an energetic point of view, we just look at the state that a person is in, yeah, which is sort of the materialized chronic condition, and that informs us about how a person will take the emotion that they're having and how they will express it. And in coaching, this is a really good tool, because all I really need to look at how the person expresses themselves, and that informs me about what state they're in. Here on the left, you see the red arrow that points down, indicating that there's a downward spiral, and the blue arrow that points upward, indicating that there's an upward spiral. What do these spirals mean? Well, if we get caught in any of these states for too long, then they have a tendency to pull us down further. If we, however, stay in these higher vibratory states for as long as we can, They have a tendency to propel us further, to lead us to grow. And that's where I would like to point your attention to. Because if we focus on that, if we focus on the higher expressions, and don't go against the emotions themselves, because they inform us about something that we need to know. They inform us about, these unresolved aspects that you guys mentioned before. Yeah, we want to have that information. We want to know what's going on inside of us. But guess what? We want to have the freedom to choose how we express it, how we express our emotions. And then you see here truth as sort of the big divider. And this is why I sent you guys through this contemplation here, because without truth, without knowing what it's truly about, you don't have any freedom. There's no freedom to choose how you're going to express or how you're going to deal with things. There's no choice. Anyone who's ever been in depression or anxiety, or severe shame or guilt knows what I'm talking about. You don't have a choice. You feel like you can't get out of that state. And that is because you're not looking at truth. You're not looking at what this is truly about. So truth can really elevate us no matter what, say, predominant state we find ourselves in. That's the exercise, guys. That's how you do this. You look at what it's truly about. Is there an unmet need there? Is there an unrealistic expectation there? Is there a value there that you need validated, or that you feel got violated? I'll put this together here for you, the unmet needs. The unmet needs actually do correspond with the psychological needs. It's just augmented here for higher states. We all have a certain hierarchy of needs, and they need to be fulfilled in this order. They build upon another. Yeah, we have all of these needs at the same time, but if we, for example, don't feel safe, in our environment, it's very difficult to get into places such as, self-actualization or transcendence. Because if you're not feeling safe, you're never going to feel the freedom to actually express yourself in these ways. Or, mind you, changing the form of things. Yeah, having enough mental space to even think about how to differently approach something. So here on the left, you see a gauge, and this has to do with the coping mechanisms that we develop as a consequence of not having those needs met. Physical health issues, emotional, mental issues, trauma, addiction, coping, exhaustion, fixation, stress. Okay. And truth. And here on the left, you see how this typically plays out in our life. Yeah, the attitude that we have. And it isn't until we reach this part here. And guess what? That part correlates with self-awareness and with deeper, meaningful connection and relation.
I was just feeling, Jona, into something too. It's like having the willingness to investigate the payoff.
Yeah,
well.
investigating the payoff is an exercise in truth.
Mm.
Yeah, it always leads you to the underlying problem. Yeah. Yeah, so payoff here, you guys all know this is a big part of the Sacred Self-Healing Program, is the secondary gain or the self-gain, whether it's aware to you or not. But it is not as judgmental as you think it is, because the ego always has a bias. The ego always has a self-gain. So for as long as you're caught in your ego, you'll do nothing without self-gain, even even if it's just the avoidance of things. Yeah. Keep that in mind, because that's the main cause for unresolved issues and unawareness. Avoidance. Don't want to feel in a certain way. And for most of it has to do with our life experiences. There's one or two specific feelings that we don't ever want to feel again. And the ego would do everything to avoid it.
I can feel it, not to feel our own shit, not to feel our own stuff. We'll avoid it.
Whatever it is, it's, I mean, shit sounds a bit judgmental,
Yeah.
but I know how you mean that. Yeah. It is the unresolved stuff, guys. Now, does this mean that we have to live our lives in constant sort of turning every stone and constantly investigating our own shadow? And so, no, that's not what that means. All it means is that we have to learn to be truthful with ourselves and what it's truly about. Now, here's a slide that shows you what happens when, you know, these needs that we have here and they're not met. Guys, this is all textbook stuff. Yeah, there's two versions, two expressions, not high or lower, but, you know, sort of active or passive. Yeah, so some people have, you know, like a more passive personality. They're more externalized, internalized, and some, you know, have more extrovert, more aggressive, more externalized personality, and then it will express a little differently. I forgot which step this is. I think that's step 17. I'm not sure where this is explained. Yeah, if you will, all these black things here that you see left and right, those are all coping mechanisms. Those are all shadow aspects, yeah, of what happens to us when we don't get what we need. But the problem is that we often are so unaware of it that we project it onto others. Yeah. That we want something from somebody because it's our unmet need. And that can often lead to conflicts or misunderstandings or victimhood or, you know, disappointment. Because a lot of times it has nothing to do with the people that are involved. Now, Janet, obviously, when we have committed relationships, and I don't know if you know this, but we have a whole entire 14-week course about love, integrity, and relationship building, and you know, especially when you put the energetic component into this.
Yeah,
I
watched that first video that's on your thing.
Mm-hmm.
I watched that intro.
It's a very complex thing, you know, and what you realize is that yes, we all have a tendency to, you know, wanting certain things, but you know, at a certain level of consciousness, you also got to realize that that's your problem. You know, that's not the other person's problem. And yes, obviously, if you make agreements, if you you know, negotiate certain things, and let's say you agree that you get married and that you're devoted to each other and so forth, but you know, I said at a certain level of consciousness, you're also devoted to your own true self. And if you don't have any severe self-love deficiency, you will recognize that the devotion to your own higher self is, you know, precedes the devotion to the relationship. The relationship is an expression of your relationship with your higher self. So there's like a lot more up there, guys. Yeah, a lot more. But fundamentally, where we get, you know, sort of stuck here in our lives is with these kind of coping mechanisms that our ego develops as a consequence of not having those needs met. And this is what, awareness coaching and energy coaching is all about, to identify this for ourselves, yeah, and then to specifically work with those aspects and self-heal them, yeah, because they really don't have anything to do with other people. So underneath all unmet needs is a lack of connection. That's then the conclusion that one can come to, which plays into this spiritual. We don't call it spiritual emotions. We call it spiritual feeling. Also, spiritual feeling is based on the inner experience of love and connection, and that's not something that can be healed from the outside. Many mental health conditions and almost all substance addictions cannot be addressed without spiritual feeling and connecting. Yeah, that's it's like an insight that you get through this. So don't ever let your thoughts and emotions determine your life, yeah, or how you see yourself, or how you express yourself. That's a choice you making due to the power of your consciousness. From an etheric point of view, which is the fifth level of self-awareness, emotions and thoughts, their perception and investments form a dense etheric field around a person. Yeah, I talked about this earlier at the beginning. And also collectively, in the same way, around the planet. This field, this collective field, some call it eighth sphere, some call it lower astral realm, karmic collective, forms a wall around your heart, and with it blocks your access to your feeling soul, now to that ability to feel your own feelings, to witness it through the power of your consciousness, increasing the need for coping, avoiding, resisting, or performing, and with it to inner connection. So there's a little bit of a setup here, and that may confirm some of your conspiracy thoughts. It's not entirely wrong, but it's also not entirely true how you see this. You have to just recognize how it is. That's how it is. It's nobody in particular doing this. Well, there are some instruments here on this planet that are, well, I guess you could call it the agents, yeah, that propagate that media, for example, or, all the stuff that we've experienced here in the last 2-3 years or ongoing. That clearly shows us that there are forces at work that pull people into their lower expressions, into those inner resistances, yeah, and distract them away from recognizing the truth. And that is forming a really, really strong field, collective field. That's why, I guess, why I'm here at this time, to report about it, that forms like the magnetism almost, if you will, yeah, for your ego to go into these lower, not just lower expressions, but also these visions that are based on those lower expressions. Yeah, so this ragged etheric that I mentioned earlier, it translated, it kind of goes like this: the lower your state, the more demonic your visions are, the more negative and the more pessimistic your outlook on life is. Or you can say it the other way around: the more negative, the more hostile your outlook on life is, well, the more negative and the more, ragged and ugly your expressions are going to be. This is a really tough truth to digest, because our ego wants to externalize it all and wants to see, us, but with, itself as a victim of that. But the truth is that this eighth sphere, this lower astral realm or karmic collective, is formed through us. We're feeding into this permanently, constantly. Not permanently, it's mutable, but it's constantly happening. And whichever frequency it is that we're sending out there, that's the one we're tuning in, just on the radio. So that's what you're going to get reflected back to you. So if I meet a guy out there who says something mean to me or bitch or whatever, and I go home and I take this on and I allow that, yeah, to pull me into that field, okay, and I, throw a pity party and, watch my pain movies and listen to sad music, all right, then all I am experiencing is an amplification of that state that I unconsciously, yes, I agree, allowed myself to tune into. This is very, very difficult for our ego, and you can't really wrap your mind around this. You need to feel this. And yes, Julian, you're right. It makes us responsible, but responsible in a different way than you think. More in the way of karma. Karma means action. It makes us responsible for, well, how we see the world and ourselves and other people. And that's what we need to investigate. What's the life view? What's the world view behind this or that judgment that I'm having here? And who's really in charge? Who can change this? If I have an idea, as you guys don't know, I did. Yeah, I was married and divorced twice. Yeah, a husband who's demeaning, who makes fun of my spiritual views, who treats me with disrespect. Whose fault is it now? Seen from a bigger perspective, guys. Whose fault is it that I'm in pain, that I'm suffering?
Well, ultimately, it was you who made the choice to participate in this relationship, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it
Exactly.
doesn't help. I mean, the fact that the other person was so negatively skewed in his expression and you were there, I guess you volunteered to be the receptor.
It doesn't even, that's not even it.
It all comes
The
down to
choice to
actually
stay.
present and feeling actually what we're feeling and understanding that we're choosing it.
Yeah, it's completely irrelevant whose fault it is. It's irrelevant what he does.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, obviously, it doesn't express a very high conscious level. It expresses values that are, say, lower than mine. Yeah, at least from my perspective.
And it's
Yeah.
to wake up to what we're choosing, yeah? It's like,
Yeah.
wow. Well,
Yeah.
wow. I'm waking
He's
up.
choosing that. He's choosing that, but I'm not choosing that. So it's in my power to say, oh, okay, oh, well, I guess then we have different values. But just so you know, that doesn't work for me. Because, demeaning people and this and this and this and that. In my world, that's a lower expression. And I don't subscribe to that. I don't expose myself to that.
And in the end, it's like, well, and that's all that is. It's just a lower expression. So we don't even have to even make it anything or go, yes.
No, I mean, like, I can full-heartedly say that both, especially my first husband, the alcoholic, they're not bad people. They're good men, okay, but caught in very low states.
And we're acting out through those states. It's just the acting out.
Yes, exactly. And ultimately then, and this is how we're going to close, it comes down to something, Julian, that you said. It comes down to the willingness. The willingness. And if you investigate this word, you'll find that it's composed of two aspects. First, the will. And second, well, in the English language, that is, ing, yeah, which expresses a verb, it expresses doing an action. And this then shows us that at the, after we've been able to master our thoughts and our emotions a little better, it comes down to our will. Now, in this case, my first husband could not master neither his thoughts nor his emotions. In my second marriage, my husband had a slightly higher conscious level. He could master his thoughts, but not his emotions. So all that is fine. Those are good people, on their level. They have good values. I would have never married them if they didn't have good values, but they're unable to live up to them, to their own values. They're unable to have the congruent expression of that. So investigating the values that a person has that we interact with is obviously the first step, but the second step is also to watch the congruency here. Are they expressing themselves according to their own values? And guess what, guys? The reason why we're also afraid of our shadows and why we avoid this and this and this and that, and why our ego is kicking and screaming, because there's something there where we are not acting according to our own values. And by the way, that's the reason why people who are, I guess, whom we would call evil people, have no problem with that. Because if they don't have those values, it doesn't bother them. It's only the people who have good values but don't live up to them who have problems with that. And that's then where all the coping, all the addictions, all the mental illnesses and so forth come in. Obviously, trauma and all that is real, and abuse and all that. And I'm not negating that. I'm not saying it's all our own fault. No. But to be able to get pulled into such a situation where there's abuse, and I have been, so it's not like a distant thing for me. Yeah, so I speak out of my own experience, requires us to negate something in us, our own values, our own inner connection, our own self-love. And once you realize that all of this comes down to love, and the integrity that you have with yourself, and that's your highest protection. You don't need to worry about other people's values. You just mingle with those who do have values and who have the willingness, who can control their will, to act accordingly. The only way to master your emotions is by being in truth with yourself. And that's not an on and off or black and white thing, guys. That's why judging ourselves and others is just an ego distraction. It's a constant striving for higher expression that leads to higher consciousness. And that constant striving, guys, that's the same as willingness. It's expressed by your focus and with it your ability to think, feel, perceive, and choose on your own. Yeah, so that we can bring our body, mind, heart, soul, and spirit into balance with another. So just real quick here to summarize this, because obviously there's a lot more to discuss, and you'll be happy to hear that the practice workshop for mastering our emotions is all about that. It's all about, you know, and this is more of a talking rather than lecturing workshop about handling big emotions, yeah, and following the trail just like you did a little bit right now. Yeah, so these are the different stages of mastering your emotions, and you see it's very complex. Yeah, it always starts with self-reflection. Knowing the order of processing is that informs you about the importance of signals and how they sometimes get overridden, how you override your own inner signals. Yeah, this is the main cause for you not trusting in your inner guidance. Number 2, becoming aware of your avoidances and your resistances, because that's how your ego, fundamentally operates. Yeah, avoiding pain and seeking pleasure, but seeking pleasure really is just a distraction. Yeah, that helps to avoid better. So become more aware of what your avoidance is. Ask yourself, what am I avoiding here? What am I resisting here? Number 3, work on your expressions. Brush up on your emotional literacy. Describe your emotions and your feeling states more accurately so that whomever it concerns can better understand you and can, so that you can, be in the position that you can correct and mend and reconcile and grow. Number 4, connect within. Examine resistances and payoffs from this inner perspective, from that inner connection piece, not psychology, not conditioning, no. It's a bone-crushing honesty with yourself that you need for that. And then discern, become aware of your ego drive. Ego drive is always based on avoidance. Yeah, like the feeling that you don't want to feel. Even if it is that you don't want other people to feel something. Now that's a projection. Really what you don't want is to feel it instead of them. Okay, it's all about you in the end. And become more aware of your unmet needs. Yeah, what it truly is that you're in for. Number 6, understand what your true values or your true priorities are and how they actually coincide with your investments. Because your ego has a tendency to invest in things that it likes. Yeah, maybe because it helps to avoid something, or maybe it helps to seek pleasure. But once the ego invests in something, it becomes harder and harder for it to let go of it. And it needs it to be validated. It needs a story around it. It needs justifications, blame, and all of these things. All come from how much you invest in things, how much you want to be right. Number 7, learn to let go. Yeah, learn to let go of the things that are not essential. That you don't truly need. Do you really need the validation of the cashier in the grocery store? Really? Is that really important? No. Yeah, so it's the refocus exercise. Yeah, become more aware of what you truly need. And then number 8, transcend, revisit, imbalance, and correct. Revisit imbalances and correct. Go back, revisit, say, hey, this didn't come out right. What I really meant to say or how I truly felt about this was. That's a higher expression of fighting and conflicts. It's to correct, make amends, bring things into balance again. And then number 9, resolve. Through your true expression. And you see words such as cultivate here or embodiment, yeah, embodying it. That's a constant striving. That's a constant action of improvement, constantly. And when you understand that, then you also understand the nature of karma. Yeah, because karma also seems to act in a constant way, but that's only due to your own resistance. Because karma is actually there to teach us what to transcend. Which is why, no matter how you break it down, I could break it down in simpler terms, but in these workshops here we go a little deeper. This has to happen over and over again. Yeah, and then people ask me, well, how long does this take? When am I done with this? I always ask them, well, why? What's so bad about it? Why do you want to be done with it? Wouldn't you want to constantly improve? Wouldn't you want to finding the yet higher expression of something? Isn't that what nature uses as evolutionary power? Isn't that what the divine uses as the source code for everything, for creation? Here are some worksheets that you can use to train this with yourself. There's other workshops that we've done in the past where I've introduced those worksheets. You can look them up. Energetic wellness, also the self-mastery one. So ultimately, what we learn about emotions, and the mastery thereof, you figured this out. It's all about fear because that's underneath everything. So we have to learn to reframe that, and related, quote unquote, negative emotions such as defeat or rejection as an opportunity to learn and grow. And once you can see every, fear, pain, defeat, rejection, whatever, negative happens in your life as an opportunity to grow, that's when you get it. That's when you are moving toward emotional mastery. All right, guys, I know that this is deep stuff and that this requires a lot of processing. So I'm not expecting you to, have a lot more to say other than, questions maybe. Are there any questions? At this point, I'd rather have you feel into this and maybe listen to the recording. Yeah, this is not the normal success coaching, blah, blah. This is the real deal, guys. This is dealing with our human nature and seeing it for what it is. And it's neither weak to have emotions, nor is it weak to be human. It's a gift. It's a gift that is supposed to help us learn how to grow through learning, how to strive for a higher expression, how to evolve, and how to, with that, express our devotion to the divine nature that is in us due to the power of consciousness, due to the power of this awareness. You are expressing, even by just following along here, by just listening. You're cultivating, you're expressing, you're tending to this inner relationship with your higher self and ultimately with the divine, with God. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, you Janet, Julianne, and Linda, for sharing and asking questions. It's wonderful. It's been a true pleasure and honor to have you here as these active participants. Yeah, it's a lot of listeners, and I understand that. It's a lot to process. So I hope to see you guys in the practice workshop for how to deal with big emotions, where we're going to talk about the subjective experience of that, and where we're going to go into tips, like, okay, we could try this, we could try that, and work through examples that you hopefully come with. I hope that you come with examples that we can use, to practice that, to train that, to show our willingness. Lovely. All the best, and see you soon, guys. Bye-bye.